Hey, Amazon sellers. I want to share something that can completely change the way you run your business. For the last decade, I've built a world-class Amazon team that's helped me sell over $50 million on the platform and scale multiple seven-figure brands. Now, that same team and process is available to help you build, grow, and scale your Amazon business. This is not a course. It's not a DIY program. It's done for you Amazon growth handled by proven experts. We handle everything from listing optimization and SEO to PPC, inventory, catalog management, promotions, review strategy, compliance, and new product launches, so you can focus on running your business while we handle the rest. If you're ready to turn your Amazon channel into a profit machine, visit the link in the show notes, calendly.com/firingtheman/Amazon, and book a time to see if this is a good fit for you.
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. Today's guest is Jason Greenwood, the founder of Greenwood Consulting and the host of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. Jason has spent more than 25 years helping brands, manufacturers, distributors, and e-commerce businesses navigate digital transformation. Today, we'll discuss the future of e-commerce, AI, digital transformation, and what business owners need to know to stay relevant in an increasingly automated world. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I had you on my podcast recently, so it's always fun to do a bit of a pod swap.
Absolutely. So to give a little introduction, share with the audience a little bit about yourself and your path in the e-commerce world.
Yeah, look, this is my 26th year. I'm at risk of dating myself, I realize, but this is my 26th year in e-commerce. Started in 2000. So, one of the old heads, so to speak, have a few gray hairs to show for the pleasure. But, it's been an amazing ride. I am old enough, I'm 51. And so I remember when there was no internet. I'm kind of in that bridge generation where I was old enough when the internet came along that I could embrace it immediately. And I remember doing so. I remember, a world pre-internet. I remember the coming of the internet. I remember the mainstreaming of the internet. And now I have been able to witness the mainlining of the internet with devices like this right here in my hot little hand. And so it's been quite the ride. Started out in agency land, also owned my own e-commerce pure play business with a business partner many, many years ago, ran that for 7 years, went back into agency land, have worked brand side, managing e-commerce. And for the last nearly 7 years, I've owned my own B2B e-commerce specific consultancy, an advisory service. And I work with manufacturers, distributors, agencies, platform vendors, and investors all in the B2B e-commerce space. And it's been a wild ride. It's been a fun ride. It's given me a life and friendships that I could have only dreamt about 26 years ago. Can't imagine doing anything else. I get to be a digital nomad. My wife and I love to travel. We don't have kids. So, being able to work remotely, we've always been able to work remotely in our digital space. But especially since COVID, there's none of my clients have any expectation that they're ever going to see me in person. Now, sometimes they do. If I happen to be in region or they want me to come on site and do a presentation or something like that, then we can make that happen. But typically I'm working with my clients all remotely, and the amount of freedom that gives me and my wife to travel and do things abroad is just so exciting. So this industry has been exceptionally good to me. I try to put out content every single day, and I release 3 podcast episodes a week, put out content across LinkedIn and Substack and all sorts of other channels every day in an effort to sort of send the ladder back down again. Because when I first started in this industry, I had 3 or 4 people that really took me under their wing, taught me everything that they know, helped bring me into the industry, helped bring me up in the industry, and help give me an education and get me started on the right foot in the industry. And that's what I really try to do today, is to try to give back to the industry every way that I can. I'm the global MC for all of the B2B e-commerce world events, and I try to speak at as many events globally as I can. And, that's just really, it's my way It's like my love letter back to an industry that's treated me super well over the last 26 years.
I really like that. And for anyone who hasn't listened, check out the E-commerce Edge podcast. I was a fan of yours long before we podcasted together. So really excited to have you on the show and excited to get into this. So one thing I think that's very impressive about your resume is your tenure in the industry. There's not many people. I mean, you can't get much longer than 25 years. The internet hasn't been around that long. And so what are, if you go back to, 25 years ago versus today, what have been some of the most significant changes that you've witnessed, and what do you think is still ahead?
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 that absolutely stand out to me, and like there's specific, maybe foundational or core memories of things happening that I could sort of waypoints along the way that have led to a pattern recognition that now I can sort of overlay over things like AI and things like that. And I can start to recognize some of these ground shifts that happen in our industry and have happened over the last couple of decades. The first one is broadband, for sure. Like there was always, I remember dial-up, and I remember getting kicked off of phone calls when, you needed to use dial-up, or a phone call would come in and it would kick you off the internet. When a phone call came in and you were already on dial-up and having to share a phone line, with a phone call. And so like most people today who were mature or old enough to use the internet in the last decade, they don't really appreciate how challenging things were in the early days. Like everything was hard. Like I used to build, websites on Dreamweaver, and I used to, just like everything about the internet was hard. I remember the days of frames. I remember like the early days of web technologies. I remember entire websites being built in Flash and not being able to be indexed by Google. I remember when we were all, before there were like the standards of the internet, like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we were all still trying to figure this out. We were trying to figure out secure payments. I remember in my first, early days of running an e-commerce business, there was no really easy to implement payment gateways. And so your bank was your business bank was your merchant provider. They provided your merchant account. And so you had zip-zap machines that were given to you. And then for online transactions, they would give you a line sheet where you would have to capture credit card details from your customer. You would have to manually write down the details of the transaction, the credit card number that you had captured, and then you would ring up their automated phone number at the bank and get a transaction approval number for every single credit card transaction that you took as an online business. And then you would submit that as a bank deposit, that whole entire sheet, which had like 50 lines on it. You would fold that up into thirds. You would hand that over to the counter at your bank, and that would go in as a deposit, right? With all the approvals. And it would take 2 weeks before you could even access those funds, right? And so like just literally everything about the internet and e-commerce was difficult in the beginning. And, that taught us all a lot about patience. That taught us all a lot about how to work with Google, who kind of owned the internet in the beginning. And if you wanted to be discovered as a business, you had to get indexed by Google, and you had to go into link swap and link indexes. And you had to do, some gray hat SEO work to be able to get ahead in those early days. And you had to be quite technical, because everything about SEO back in the early days was technical. It was all technical SEO. So you had to understand, all of your meta tagging. You had to understand the structure of HTML. You had to understand robots.txt files. Like none of this stuff was, if you were non-technical, you found it really difficult to do well online back in those early days. Now, obviously, since then, we've had Shopify and we've had other platforms come along that have made it super easy to stand up a new e-commerce website and get up and running in 24 hours or less, right? With their own payment gateway and everything. And so the first real big change came when broadband came along, and when it became mainstream, that now all of a sudden we could do, because when I first moved to New Zealand from the United States in my early 20s, net to phone was a big thing. Like phone calls internationally were super expensive. They were between 25 cents and $1 a minute to make an international phone call back in the day. So a lot of us use what's called net to phone, which is an application that you could use on your computer, and it would cost you like 2 cents a minute. It had a digital wallet. You could load up $50 on your digital wallet, and then it was a very early version of VoIP, and you could call people all over the world, computer to computer, and it was pennies, compared to an international phone call. But I tell you, when you were trying to do that on dial-up, very difficult, very, very difficult. You would lose a connection. You would have massive duplexing issues. And then once broadband became mainstream, all of a sudden that it all just worked. And it was the same with even e-commerce websites. They would take forever to load on dial-up. Now all of a sudden, once you had broadband, they would load what felt like almost instantaneously. Obviously, YouTube came along on the back of broadband internet. So broadband, first big change to the internet, right? And all of a sudden now you had parallel lines. You could be online and use your telephone, your landline phone at the same time. Big change, big change. Then mobile. I remember distinctly that Nokia had their proprietary WAP browser on their very, very early quote-unquote smartphones. And I remember a friend of mine had, I think it was the 8910. I think that was the model. It was like the latest and greatest. It was like a $2,000 phone. And this was way back in the day. So this is like the equivalent of a $10,000 phone today. And I remember him showing me on this LCD screen this WAP browser that he could connect to the internet with and he could load web pages with. Now, it was only like a 1-inch by 1-inch square screen, but I remember thinking at the time, this is a crap experience now, but this changes everything forever. It literally changes everything forever, because if we can now do internet things on these phones, wow, game changer. Don't necessarily need a laptop. Don't necessarily need a desktop anymore. Now we can do stuff online from the palm of our hand. And I just knew it was going to get better. And then I remember when the first iPhone 3G came out, I was like, okay, now this is the net, because I at the time that the iPhone 3G came out, I had a BlackBerry Pearl, and I remember thinking this is a step change in the way that we are going to interface with devices, everything being touchscreen. It is an absolute game changer, right? And then we obviously had to build mobile websites for these new mobile browsers. And so I remember the M-dot revolution, right? Because before everything was mobile responsive, we built dedicated websites or apps for mobile instead of just having everything be responsive based on viewport. And that fad of M-dot websites, completely custom mobile websites, lasted for about 18 months. And then all of a sudden we got religion about responsive websites, and all of a sudden now you just accessed it through whatever device you had, whether it was a tablet, a smartphone, or a computer, right? So those have been like the biggest definitely game-changing milestones I can think of as we went through the internet and as the phone became the remote control of our lives. And then latterly, there's two other things that have really been game changers. One is that retail e-commerce has always been 5 to 10 years ahead of B2B e-commerce for manufacturers and distributors. And that's because in the B2B world, all relationships tend to be long-term relationships, and they all tend to be based on belly-to-belly selling, physical person-to-person selling, right? A sales rep going and knocking on doors, meeting people, building relationships, building out price lists, etc. And so the entire B2B industry has been very reticent because of their complexity and because of their people-first nature. They've been really reticent to adopt e-commerce technology, and more importantly, business leaders have found it difficult to reconcile, okay, low-cost customer acquisition and sales processes done digitally, and how do we compensate sales teams for transactions that come through digital channels? Like, should we compensate them equally through physical and digital channels? Should we compensate them more or less for digital sales? And there's been this tension between leadership and them wanting digital enablement and sales teams being really resistant to digital enablement because they see that as the robots replacing them, right? And so, but I've seen that change radically over the last few years that I've worked in this space, and everybody's getting religion about digital, even in the B2B world, because there's not a sales rep alive that likes doing manual admin work. There's just they just don't like it, and so it doesn't put that manual admin work does not put any more commission in their back pocket. And so and in our research with all of our clients, for the B2B businesses that measure activity by task with their sales teams, anywhere from 20 to 60% of a sales rep's time is spent on unproductive admin that adds no value to them or their customer. And so things like going out and taking an order in the field and then come back and keying it into an ERP system. So what we know is that for the B2Bs that track sales reps' time by activity, we know that most of it is unproductive time. And so that's what I'm here to do in the B2B world, is to give B2B businesses superpowers and to give sales reps superpowers and to take away all the crap that they don't want to do anyway. And so those have been some big things, and the adoption of e-commerce within the B2B world is accelerating very, very rapidly now. It's outstripping B2C and D2C e-commerce growth by about 7 or 8 to 1, and it's looking to be that way till at least 2030. Only about 40 to 60% of the B2Bs in the United States today offer e-commerce at all, whereas like 98% of retailers offer e-commerce today in the United States. So there's not as much greenfield work anymore in retail e-commerce. It's a lot of incumbency there that you have to unseat to win new deals in B2C. B2B, not the case. B2B, it's still blue ocean as far as the eye can see, and it's looking to be that way for many years to come. So it's been an exciting ride, but the obviously the latest trend that some people thought was just going to be a short-term fad, but the thing that has turned into a trend is absolutely AI touching everything to do with our industry. And it's not that I was ever not excited about our industry, but it is given me even more excitement, even more to look forward to. It is reinvigorated me, and I'm as excited to be in e-commerce today as I have ever been, especially with AI and the tooling that we have available to us today is world class, and it is so exciting to be able to 10x. I just ran a report just yesterday. I ran a report on some of the tasks that I had done with AI over the last, say, 2 months, and on average, ranging anywhere from sort of 2x more productive to 20x more productive. I am about 8 times more productive on those tasks that I use an AI co-pilot to assist with than doing it 100% on my own. So that level of productivity gain is just phenomenal, and I expect that to accelerate in my own business as I continue to automate back office workflows.
Outstanding. Let's go in the direction of AI, because it's a really hot topic right now, and I don't know if this has been true for you. And I had thought maybe AI is going to decrease the amount of hours I work per day. And what I found is that's not the case. It is almost as if I'm like playing professional sports with a bunch of steroids. I can be so much more productive. I can do so much more work, and I'm enjoying it more. I really am. And so, curious, have you had that experience, and what are some practical things that e-commerce business owners can do with AI to help make them more productive? Hey guys, I want to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, the book Cash Flow by Scott Brandley and DJ Sprague. I've spent the last decade building e-commerce brands and over 20 years running businesses, so I've read a lot of books on growth and profitability. Most of them explain the problems, but they don't give you many real-world solutions. Cash Flow is different. This book uncovers the hidden leaks inside your business, things like false payment declines, friction in your checkout, missing trust signals, and operational inefficiencies that quietly crush your conversion rate. And a lot of these losses never even show up on your P&L. I'm a retired CPA, and I review my numbers constantly. And even I had a few aha moments reading this book. If you run an e-commerce business, this is one worth checking out. There's a link in the show notes where you can grab a copy of Cash Flow, CASHFLO, and learn how to start plugging those hidden profit leaks. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, 100%. Like I'm doing the same. I probably work on average 4 hours a day on client work, and then the other 4 to 6 hours a day is on content. I still spend 8 to 10 hours a week on content, as I have done for the last decade, and I don't foresee that changing anytime soon because I just love being a creator, and it's an outlet for my creative passion. And But what the amount of work and the amount of client work that I can get done in that same 4 hour span is 8 to 10x, right? And it also helps me to automate processes that have historically been very manual and very painful in my business. So I use lots of different AI tooling every day, from Gemini to Grok to lots of different tooling in my enterprise software and everything else. But the agentic platform that I have really truly fallen in love with and used to automate most things in my business over the last 6 months is Manus. And it has allowed me to create agentic workflows in the platform that are just mind-blowing in like, it's like having an analyst on staff at all times. It is like having a PA and EA on staff at all times. I can send it off in 5 different tabs. And what's really interesting about Manus is it will spool up as many parallel agentic workflows as it thinks it needs to do a task. So it will break down a task that I give it into all the subtasks that it logically thinks it should break down a task into, and then spool up virtual machines and agents within each of those virtual machines to go and do research on the internet, or to draft a document, or to create a spreadsheet, or whatever. I don't have to tell it how to break down a singular task into agentic subtasks. It does all that for me, and it breaks it down in the most efficient, bite-sized chunked subtasks as necessary to get things done as fast and efficiently as possible. And I tell you, the amount of time savings that has done for me. Like, I create the boundaries, I create the brief for the task, I tell it exactly what I want, I tell it what type of research I need, I tell it what type of citations I need. Like, I give it I give it a good brief, because like, normally I would have to do this stuff myself, right? And so I know exactly what needs to be done. But then I also am smart enough to realize that maybe it has things that it can do that I can't do, and maybe it will think of things. So I say, is this the most efficient way? Or is there something I'm missing here? So I use it as a thought partner as much as an execution partner. And I have even, one of the things that I've done with it recently that has made me completely revisit how I price and position my business in the market. I gave it a task. I said, look, here's my profile. Here's my profile page on my website. I'm 51 years old. Here's my goals. Here's where I want to be in 5 years, whatever. And if you were me, how would you structure your business? How would you even be doing what I do now? How would you, if the goals are these 3 or 4 things, what would you do with my profile and my experience, and how would you build a business to achieve these outcomes? And it came back to me, and it gave me a list, like a really, really detailed, well-cited, well-reasoned list of ways that it would change what I do to make it more productive, to monetize it better, to create more freedom in my life, et cetera, et cetera. And probably greater than half of those recommendations, I'm going to be executing on over the next 6 months. So as a thought partner and an execution partner, agentic AI is just phenomenal. It is really phenomenal.
I really like that, and I really like those examples. One thing that prompt engineering is a relatively new term with AI, and it was very simple. But is this efficient, or how can I make this more efficient? And I really like that. I'm curious. Are there any other prompts that you find yourself coming back to? For instance, one of my favorites is ask me 10 questions one at a time, and then give me your output. And that, instead of being bombarded with 10 questions, it asks me number 1, and whatever I say number 1 informs what question number 2 is. And so I've really liked that. But any prompts that you're using and you find yourself using it on a pretty frequent basis?
Yeah. What am I missing? That is something. What am I missing in this thought process, or in this task, or in this activity, or this strategic approach? What am I missing? What am I not seeing here that I should be seeing? What, if it's a piece of content, what angles am I missing? What sources am I missing? What am I not seeing? What are my blind spots around this thing? Because I have experience and I have assumptions based on that experience. What assumptions am I making that could be wrong, that are creating a blind spot in my thinking that you can immediately identify? And so that what am I missing line, or how would you do this? And so, for example, I have created a new entirely new framework for scoring, summarizing, citing, and doing data visualization for platform selection for my clients. And so I had an idea of what I wanted to achieve, but I am not a spreadsheet guru at all. And I wanted to create some custom formulas to create some certain scoring rubrics that I didn't know how to write those formulas in a Google Sheet. So I said, here's what I want to achieve. How should I do this? And I'm going to connect you to Google Workspace, and I'm going to get you to create the spreadsheet. I'm going to get you to create the scoring rubric. I'm going to get you to create the summary tab. This is what I want to see in the summary tab. And I'm going to get you create the data visualization tab. You're going to help me create the data visualizations, the charts, the graphs, and everything else to visually represent what the prior 10 tabs say. And all the results we've come to, we're going to create a summary justification tab, and we're going to create a data visualization tab. It's because I always believe in show, don't tell. And it helped me over the span of a few hours. It helped me completely create all of the data architecture, the formulas, the summary tables, the data visualizations. And I went through the thought exercise even on the data visualizations. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? How would this be more human consumable? How could we, how can we present this in a way that requires a lot less mental bandwidth than just looking at a summary table of information? And here's kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think? What would you do if you were in my seat and you were delivering this piece of work to a client? What do you think would make this more palatable and more valuable to the client if they were consuming this, right? And why? Tell me why you think that. Don't just tell me what to do, and tell me how you're going to do it, but also tell me why. What is the justification for thinking that? And then it would cite resources, it would cite research, you do have to know what to ask, right? But I think prompt engineering. So today, I know that a lot of kids coming out of university and school, they're putting on their CV, expert prompt engineer, etc. I think give it another 12 or 18 months, it is going to be just as ridiculous to put on your CV that you are an expert prompt engineer as it would be today to say you're an expert Googler, right? I remember people applying to work at our agency 20 plus years ago. And I remember them on CV saying, I'm an expert Googler. I can find anything on the internet. I can find any piece of esoteric information on the internet. And I'm an expert at that. And that was a valuable skill to have back in the day when yes, you had Google, but to find the needle in the haystack information was actually a skill, and it was query engineering, for lack of a better term, back then, right? And refining queries to get the actual information get your hands on the actual information that you wanted, right? I remember trying to find abstracts for medical research. I remember trying to find abstracts from university research that was on, web servers that Google had access to back then, but you had to know what terminology to use to get access to this hidden information, right? That was publicly accessible, but you had to know how to query it to get access to that information or to find it on a web server somewhere. So, and that's prompt engineering today, right? If you're an expert prompt engineer, like I think I am, I've been doing this for 2 years now on the trot. I'm pretty good at being able to get the results from AI that I need. But I think give it another 12 or 18 months and everybody's going to be an expert prompt engineer, at least in the tech space, because if you use something every single day, you quickly learn how to get the best out of it.
Yeah, I agree. And there are things we're doing now that if you would have said 6 or 12 months ago that this is going to be possible, I would have said not a chance. And so it's kind of fun to think about what the future is like. It's changing so quickly. And yes. And so I'm curious, what resources, what content, what are you consuming to continue to sharpen your sword and stay at the cutting edge of AI?
Well, I spend about 3 hours a day, somewhere between an hour and a half and 3 hours a day walking my dogs. right?
Uh-huh.
I try to get out of the house. And the good thing about my dogs, they're both high energy. One's a Border Collie cross and one's a Jack Russell cross. So they're both super high energy dogs. And if I don't get them out of the house at least twice a day, they're climbing the walls. And so it's very, because I could easily sit in front of my computer for 8 hours a day and not even realize that I've been sitting at the computer for 8 hours. It's that easy to do. And so it's good that my dogs come and bother me several times a day to go for a walk, because otherwise I would just be glued to my chair, and it would not be healthy for my mind, my eyes, my brain, or my heart, or my body. And so it is good to get them out. And so I listen to a tremendous amount of podcasts when I'm walking, and everything from the Operators Pod to specific AI podcasts to financial podcasts to, This Week in Startups to, All In to, I have a lot of high-end, high thought podcast on repeat that I listen to every day that they have a new episode that comes out. I'm a religious follower of those podcasts. And so I try to have that coming in as kind of new, it really helps to prompt new thinking in new ways when you're hearing the thought process that some of these people are going through in their own businesses, in their own content, in their own everything, and also in their own daily use of these tools. Like they highlight the things that they're learning every day by using these tools. And so I'm like, I'll go and try that. I'm going to go and try that in my own system. I'm going to go and try that in Manus. I'm going to go and try that in Gemini. I'm going to go try that in Grok. I'm going to go and, try that in ChatGPT or whatever it is. And so that, since and Claude, I'm using Claude Code, I'm using Lovable, so I'm using coding agents, I'm using answer agents, and I'm using action agents every single day. And it's man, as somebody who's a very, very, very technical non-developer, the kind of stuff I've been able to create using coding agents and using action agents is wild. So I needed to create for a client. We have a whole entire architecture that I built alongside one of my SI clients for an end client. And there was a whole series of what we call KDDs, or key design decisions, that they need to make across this entire architecture before we can move forward with proof of concept and a whole bunch of other things. And there was about 32 key design decisions they would need to make to move forward to the next phase of the engagement. And we could have just dumped this all into a Google Sheet or into a Confluence doc or something like that, and with little drop downs, and they could just select, right, and maybe put some notes in there. But we wanted to make this a more engaging experience. And so we decided to build this out as a web app using Google Apps Script. And so I told Manus what I wanted to do. I connected it to my workspace, and I said, look, this is what I want to build. Here's what I want it to look like. We want sliders. We want radio buttons. We want comment fields. We want drop downs, and we want all this stuff, right? Oh, and here's the raw data of the key design decisions we want to put on this form, this really interactive form. And I said, go build it, deploy the Google Apps Script, link it to a Google Sheet on the back end to track and be able to recall all the responses by email address because on the client side, they had like 3 or 4 people that needed to respond to these KDDs. And we wanted to track who was providing the responses, what decision they had made, and is this a high confidence or low confidence decision or a final decision, right? We want to track all that. And in about less than 10 minutes, it had built the HTML front end form with all the JavaScript on the front end. It had built the apps script to deploy it to the front end. It had created all of the logic in the backend Google Sheet. It had created the Google Sheet. It had linked them both together, and then it had deployed it to a URL where I could test it.
Wow.
Just phenomenal. Just like, and I'm a non-developer, but I know what the software development lifecycle looks like, so I know how to create a really good brief. And of course, because I'm a solution architect, like I get how you have to speak the language of a developer to get a good outcome. And like, just like if I had tried to do that manually with some instruction list off of a website somewhere of how to do it, like it would have probably taken me a day to do it. But using Manus as my co-pilot, 10 minutes, job done, ready to test. Boom, ready for me to test and ready for me to surface to the end customer.
Yeah, that's an incredible example and a good example of how your productivity can 10x or greater. What do you think this means for the workforce and human beings in general?
I think the biggest challenge is entry-level roles. So I'm a I guess I would consider myself a domain expert on like e-commerce, particularly B2B. And like I've been in the industry for a long time, and I started at the bottom. I started as a real super junior person working in a digital agency, and kind of learned everything along the way through some trial and error. And it was really early in the industry, so nobody had all the answers. And so, and I was like super junior. When I started, I was an internet user, but I was not an internet expert by any stretch of the imagination. And but I saw the writing on the wall back then even, and I said, this is going to change the world forever. And I don't even know how fully it's going to change the world, but it will change the world forever. And I need to be a part of this. And I was compelled. I felt compelled to figure out how I could play a significant role in the future of the internet right from day one. I felt that. And I'm a little bit concerned. I'm both concerned. I'm equally concerned and excited. So I'll just caveat up by saying that I'm a little bit concerned about all the super junior roles in most companies because I think AI can replace most juniors today already. Like it can replace a lot of seniors too. But in particular, like all that grunt work, that manual grunt work with spreadsheets and SEO work and all that stuff that I did back in the day manually, and all the manually emailing, webmasters at the time. Hey, can we swap links? Hey, can I get your directory? Hey, that all the people skills that I developed, all the communication skills that I developed, all the collaboration skills that I developed back in those early days, and all the research skills that I developed back in those early days. Like that was years of repetition that taught me all those skills back in the early days. And I'm just concerned if there are no junior roles because AI is doing all those junior roles, how do you become a domain expert in the first place? That to me is probably my biggest concern. But the cool thing is that with AI, if you have an interest in something, it can be a thought partner, it can be an education partner, it can be a learning partner in equal measure. And so that, what used to be tribal and institutional knowledge only is a lot of that is now global knowledge that is surfaced through AI. But I think what is really, really worth pointing out is AI still hallucinates. It still makes mistakes. You still have to demand that it provides you with citations. You still have to demand that it provides you with links. You still have to demand that it provide you with its reasoning and how it came up with the conclusions it gave you. You just have to structure your prompts in such a way that it has to justify everything that it does and says so that it doesn't just spew bullshit that sounds really, really believable. And so I have coined a phrase, which is that with AI, you not only need to know the questions to ask, but you need to know the answers to question. And I am concerned. So as a domain expert, I know which answers to question because it's something inside me. There's some intuition inside me. When it spews BS at me, I go, that's not right. And I know to ask follow-up questions to get it to prove that it made something up and made it sound really believable. But I'm concerned that juniors will not know which answers to question. And I'm already seeing that in some of the people that I work with on some projects where clearly they're using AI for a lot of their work, and I don't have a problem with that. But when the deliverable is so crap, and it's obviously crap, I'm going, you didn't even take the time to review the final deliverable before you handed it over. It's fine to use AI as a thought partner. It's fine to use it as an execution partner. But ultimately, the buck stops with you when something goes to a client. And so therefore, you must review it all. Otherwise, it's your name on the line, not AI's name on the line. It's your name on the line. And so those are the kind of the pros and cons that I see about AI right now. It's AI is coming after white collar jobs. I haven't paid a lawyer to review a contract in over 2 years. I haven't needed to because I have told it all the gotchas I'm looking for. I upload the PDF of the contract. It's a 60-page contract or whatever it is with a partner or something like that. And I go, here's the gotchas. Here's the things I want to get out of this contract. Does this contract give me that? What am I missing? What thorns am I not seeing here? And then it'll come back in 30 seconds or 10 seconds with all the things I want that it doesn't give me, all the things that tilts it in the third party's favor, all the things that I should add with exact legal text in the jurisdiction of that contract. Like it's pretty phenomenal, dude. So, I'm not just saying juniors are at risk, but seniors are at risk if you do not adapt to bring more value to your clients by using AI than they can use AI themselves, then you are going to find yourself out of a job. And I'd like to think that I still today, with my 26 years of experience, because my 26 years of experience doesn't live in AI anywhere. It lives in my head. And so I'd like to think that by using AI, I still bring more value to my customer experience and customer relationship than they would be able to get by working with AI directly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I fully agree with that. I fully agree with that. Now, final question before we get to the lightning round. We've established that AI is changing e-commerce as we know it today. You also have established, and made a ton of great points about B2B being a blue ocean. What advice would you give to a young person with interest in getting into e-commerce with those two things in mind?
I would say go to work for an agency for 2 to 5 years. So if I look back at my career, agency work was simultaneously the most stressful, the most hardcore, the most demanding, the most hours I have ever done in a week of work was inside agency land and client engagements where there were deadlines, where there were deliverables, where there were resource constraints, where there were, agencies are the absolute pinnacle of a pressure cooker environment in e-commerce delivery. There's just no two ways about that. But on the flip side, I learned more in, say, 5 years of working in agency land than probably 25 years working in industry or working inside of a specific brand or working inside of a vendor even. And so I would say most people cannot do agency work forever. It's very stressful. It's just hard. Any client facing services like that, it's really hard. And oftentimes, especially in agency land, and especially if you have a team of, say, 20 or more people on your team, there's mouths to feed. And as a result of that, sometimes you take on work that you would otherwise say no to keep the mouths fed, to keep people working, to keep the money rolling in, to keep payroll paid. And so sometimes you have to take on clients that aren't a great fit just because the work is there to be done and you can make money off it, right? As an independent consultant, I don't have that problem, right? I've only got to feed me and my family. And so I swore when I started my consultancy, I swore I will never, ever take on a client or a job or an opportunity that does not feel right to me, that I don't think I can move the needle quickly in a client's business, that doesn't seem like it'll be fun, that doesn't seem like the client's a good company to work with, that I don't think I'll enjoy. And I had a second rule, which was I will never work with public companies. Because I've worked with public companies before and I know how challenging that is for a whole litany of reasons. So sometimes I'll work with public companies via an agency client that I'm helping them with a project, and the end client happens to be a public company, but I just do not work with public companies directly as a consultant because I like to see my work make it out into the wild. And in public companies, oftentimes that does not happen. And so, it's an exercise in futility and frustration oftentimes dealing with public companies. And oftentimes they think they can do it themselves anyway, so oftentimes they won't hire a consultant anyway. So, that is kind of where I've landed on this thing. Is I'm going to continue to use AI. I'm going to continue to adopt it. I'm going to continue to learn from it. I'm going to continue to teach it, just because of that's the two-way give and take with AI, right? Just with your prompting, you're teaching it, right? And so, it's a really, really fun time to be alive. But that's kind of where I've landed on all this.
I think that is great advice. That is great advice to young people. And I had a similar experience. I had 7 years in corporate consulting, 80-hour weeks. I'm so grateful for that time and what I learned. I'd never go back. But I do I think that's really sound, solid advice. And so, all right, Jason, we've covered a lot today. Before we close out the episode, we have something called the fire round. It's 4 questions we ask every guest at the end of the show. You ready?
Let's hit it.
All right. What's your favorite book?
It is a book. It is called Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
Okay. What are your hobbies?
I have a lot of hobbies. My wife would probably say too many. I love motorcycles and dirt bikes. I love four-wheel driving with my Wrangler. I love jet skiing. I love water skiing. I love snow skiing. I love bungee jumping. Basically, I love action sports of pretty much all types. I love action sports. So anywhere we go and anywhere we travel in the world, there's almost always some sort of an action sport involved in that. And I have no fear of heights. I like skydiving. I have almost all of my hobbies are expensive and involve some sort of physical activity. I'm not a go and sit on a beach, read a book kind of guy. That's just not the way I'm wired.
Very nice. Very nice. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
All of the successful e-commerce entrepreneurs that I have ever met equally balance hunger with humility. And they generally have an outsized empathy gene, an empathy muscle versus their competitors, meaning that they care for their people. They care to create a supportive environment, an encouraging environment. Sure, it might be high pressure. It might be high demand. But that equal parts hunger and humility, the realization I don't know it all and I'll never know it all. I don't have a monopoly on good ideas, even though I might be the founder of this company. And understanding that good ideas can come from anywhere at any time. And the final thing I will say is that the people who travel the most tend to be the most balanced in that regard. Because I tell you, when you get outside your comfort zone, when you get outside everything you know, when you literally physically walk a mile in someone else's shoes because you visited where they live, where they buy groceries, where they do their sports, you eat their food, you speak their language. When you do those things, you see the world in a different way, but you see yourself in a different way, and you see your place in the world in a very different way. People that, grow up, live and die in their hometown, nothing wrong with that. But I tell you, it tends to make you a little bit insular. It tends to make you a little bit ignorant, and it tends to make you arrogant based on ignorance. And that's a really dangerous. When you start drinking your own Kool-Aid, there's nothing that will humble you more than finding yourself in the middle of Mexico City after your cell phone's been stolen from you. Right? There's nothing that will humble you more than realizing I don't speak this language, and they have every right to expect I come to their country and I speak their language because I'm on their turf, right? And so I tell you, travel and living in other countries. I'm now living in the third country after, I grew up in California, born and raised, lived in New Zealand for almost 30 years, been living in Mexico now since 2023. So it's my third country that I've lived in. Every one of those experiences has taught me massive life lessons, right? So I think travel and living in different places to where you were born is the single best education you can give yourself. And it will help grow both the hunger and the humility. Because when you see things done in a certain culture and you go, wow, I could take that idea and I could tweak it a little bit and I could take it back to where I operate. And it is just so inspirational. As an entrepreneur, I think you'll get more inspiration by traveling than you will by reading a business book. Let's put it that way.
That is very sound advice. I really like that. Last question, Jason. If people are interested in working with you, what's your typical client and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, look, it's pretty straightforward. It's all on greenwoodconsulting.net, but for manufacturers and distributors, I tend to work with $50 million plus per year revenue. Like $50 million to $500 million is my sweet spot, because larger than that, they tend to have very big internal teams and they tend not to necessarily need somebody like me. But 50 to 500 million, maybe $1 billion at a stretch, is in terms of annual revenue across all channels is a great sweet spot. High growth companies that are struggling with scale, maybe they're looking at implementing self-service e-commerce or a portalized experience for the very first time, or they're looking at seriously leveling up their e-commerce and digital commerce game and creating a much better experience for their customers. And I think the other thing that sets me apart as a consultant is I don't just consult on e-com, I consult on the entire commerce stack. So ERP, CRM, CDP, PIM, OMS, IMS, WMS, point of sale, system integration, enterprise architecture. I do the lot. And so that's really where I can help. And then, of course, I work with agencies who oftentimes they maybe have historically been a D2C, B2C agency. They want to get into B2B, but they don't know how. I help them with that transition, and I help them to develop their B2B e-commerce delivery capabilities in-house and their customer engagement model. And then I work with platform vendors in a similar way to help them roadmap their technology, to help them with their go-to-market, to help them with their partner model, et cetera, and then investors in the B2B space. So, but from a manufacturing distribution perspective, that 50 to 500 million, fast-growing, don't know where to go next, don't know how to use AI, don't know, they need help with technology selection, they need help with solution architecture, and they need help with AI implementation. I don't do any implementation, so I'm a pure consultancy, but I help with platform search and select, I help with partner search and select, I help with solution architecture and all the rest. So.
Outstanding. Well, Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I will post links to all of your content. To the listeners, check out E-Commerce Edge. It's an outstanding podcast and definitely in my top 5. So, all right, Jason, we'll chat with you later. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you.
Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?